Good morning, New Hampshire. How's everybody doing today? Fantastic. Well, if we haven't had the chance to meet yet, my name is Ryan Binkley. I'm a CEO of Generational Group from Dallas, Texas. I'm also a pastor, and I'm a candidate for president for the United States of America in the Republican Party. We launched our campaign really at the end of April and really have been a grassroots candidate going right through Iowa and now right through here in New Hampshire, really continuing to share this message that America is not just in trouble, but it's in desperate need of a revival. It's in need of an economic revival. And I would say this also, it's in need of a heartfelt spiritual revival. And I believe this with all my heart, that the time for that is not 2 years from now, 4 years from now, or 8 years from now. The time for that is now, absolutely right now. How many would agree with that? We have got some deep things that we're working through. And so I want to share with you just a vision that I have for the country and the time we have together, and really how for us to, I would say this, navigate a perfect storm that I see that our country is in right now. Because right now we're in a situation where it's very difficult for us to see. You know, our country was really, I believe this, created by God to be this lamppost of freedom, where our nation, where we are shining the brightness of freedom, where we have protected freedom of speech and freedom of the press and freedom to gather like we're doing here, even assembly, worship, more importantly, even in many ways, freedom of commerce and trade. And we are seeing the brightness of those freedoms get darkened every single day by debt, by corruption, you name it. We're all seeing the apathy, I think, for us to protect these freedoms start to darken. And I want to talk to you about how do we get out of this? How do we brighten this up once again and really be the nation that I believe that we're called to be? You know, our party is this party that embraces these freedoms. And all this movement of Marxism and socialism that we've seen has started to grasp us all. But it's going to take us transcending this moment. I want you to think about the state that we're in right now. It kind of reminds me of the 70s. You know, I was just a kid during that time, but if you go back to the era right after Nixon, coming out of the Vietnam War, we had tax rates in the high 70 and 80%, sometimes even higher. We had low patriotism in America, low volunteerism in America. We had gas lines. Does anybody remember the gas lines of the 70s? We had chaos. And as I'm looking at today's time, you know, and that was the days of Jimmy Carter. Everybody remember Jimmy Carter? I'm sitting there going, we are in a very similar time in many ways. We're on the verge of obviously two proxy wars that we're in right now, one with Russia and one becoming with Iran. We're in a Cold War really with China today. We're in a culture war in our country. We have problems with inflation with no plan out. No plan out. And I want to speak today kind of as an economist how to navigate through this. But this is where we are. But it's only bad news unless you look through the light at the end of the tunnel and see, well, what happened right after Jimmy Carter? Because I believe this, President Joe Biden is our generation's Jimmy Carter in many ways. And not to be disrespectful, but you look at the influence, what's happening in America. But what happened after that? A man named Ronald Reagan came and he began to speak, and I really believe this, transcend and inspire our country to another level. And that's what we need to do today in the Republican Party. And that's what I feel called to do as president, is to start to connect to America at a different level. We have to go beyond where we are. You know, the Republican Party's got the greatest message in the world. And I've heard all the candidates. I've missed the debate stage, by the way, by about 5 of you in New Hampshire. I said this, I'm coming for you, New Hampshire, because I missed it by just a few people, the first debate, and about 4 or 5 in one of the national polls. And so we're starting to poll more. Actually, we just got a polling increase in Iowa. So we were, I think, just in the top 6 there. We're climbing. But at the end of the day, though, this message is starting to resonate with people because it's the truth and it has a different message to it. But it's going to take another marketing message, I would say this, for the Republican Party in this way. We have to see beyond where we are. You know, the electorate has changed. Our message is great, but our message hasn't necessarily changed in the Republican Party. It kind of reminds me of IBM. When I was in college in 1989 at the University of Texas, I sold computers for IBM. We thought we were good. We were the Big Blue. Everybody remember Big Blue? And they came out with this new computer, and they called it WYSIWYG. What you see is what you get. I don't know if anybody remembers that. But I had an awesome new computer because I sold them, and I got to demonstrate them. And we thought we were great until this company called Apple showed up. Anybody remember Apple? And I had 2 people in my line. They'd have 20 people in their line. Now, here's the reason why. They were focused on the next generation. We were focused on the previous generation. This is what we have to do as parties, start to look around the corner and see what's coming. And when we do, we will lead again. So I'm going to talk to you today a few things that I stand for and about how to navigate. I think, Sue, there's some of the same policies that you've heard over and over, but how to do it. Anybody can identify the problem. We're in debt. We need a secure border. We got healthcare inflation. We have all these things, but what do you do about it? So I want to share with you a couple of thoughts on this. First of all, if we don't get a hold of where our country is and where our party is and how important it is to transcend, we won't win. The reality is this: in order for me to tell you where we're going to go, we have to first know where we are. Where we are right now as a Republican Party is that in the last two general elections, we have won about 46% of the general vote. That's how much we've won. We've been outnumbered in so many ways. The population of America is really huddled in the major metropolitan cities. 83% of America lives in major metropolitan cities. The Republican Party won 4 of the top 50 cities. Everybody say 4. I hate to say it, 4 of the top 50 cities by population in the last election. We've been strong in suburbs, we've been strong in rural America, but we basically backed out of urban America because we don't have a message that resonates with the, I would call it lower income or the poor, the middle class, even in urban America, or college students. And we have to have a message that connects to the heart of urban America, young people today, or we'll lose the next election as well. And I want to share with you how we can hold on to our principles of who we are, but do it in a different way. I'm not talking about big government. What I'm talking about is how to connect to people. In order to connect to people, first of all, I got to tell them the trouble that we're in financially, because this impacts us all. Inflation, as you know, is the biggest tax on the poor and the middle class than everybody in America. It's hitting all of us so hard. But what do we do about it? I was in New England College at a town hall with a bunch of college students recently, and I asked them, I said, how many of you would like for the government to pay for all of your college education? Just pay off that debt you have. I mean, one by one. Yes, absolutely. Then I said, okay, well, you'd have to agree then that we'd need to do it next year, right? Because that's fair. And the year after that, they all agreed, said yes. But then I began to explain to them what happens with debt. What happens and how do we pay that debt? What happens when we roll out the printing presses, which our Fed does to pay it off, and we borrow money from ourselves and other nations, and then that creates the inflation we have today? Because most college students don't know what our debt is. Most people in America don't know what it is. It's $32 trillion. That's not the bad news. The bad news is we're on track for it to be $50 trillion in about 8 years. It would be bad news that 8% of our budget is interest payments today, but that's not the bad news. The bad news is in 8 years, it's going to be about 15 to 20%, because interest rates have doubled and tripled in the last 8 years, and we've had easy money policy. And the other bad news is not only is inflation going to continue to soar, the worst news is that the only method that the Fed has to stop inflation is to try and kill jobs by raising interest rates. So this is their grand strategy. Let's start an inflation deduction movement by killing jobs. And how are they going to do that? Because when they raise rates, what that does is that kills the ability. I'm in the mergers and acquisitions business. It kills the ability for companies to grow by buying other companies when they don't know what the cost of capital is going to be. So now the cost of a house is 30% more than it was just 2 years ago. So this is what high inflation does. This is what high interest rates does. It stops growth. So how are we going to navigate through this time when we see where we are? Well, what I'm recommending is we've got 2 paths we can go down. It's going to be hyperinflation in the next 8 years, or it's going to be working towards a balanced budget. Now, nobody really wants to talk about that. I was talking about this 5 months ago. Everybody looked at me with eyes glazed over, like, Ryan, I don't want to go to the dentist. I don't want to go to the gym and work out, because that's what I'm telling America to do. But now I can look at young people and I can look at everybody and say, listen, we have to do this together. Republicans can't balance the budget on their own. We all saw that happen recently. We can't even pass a budget ourselves. We've only done it really one time in the last 30 years. We have not made a principal payment on debt in over 30 years. We haven't had a president, Republican president, say these words, I want to have a balanced budget, since Ronald Reagan. It's time for us to recognize that we are not leading in this way the way we need to. And as president, that's what I would do. I'd navigate this, but I would speak to America. And I would say, listen, everybody, here's why we have to do this, because if we don't do this now, we're going to have to look our children in the eye and our grandchildren and say this, I just wasn't able to make the sacrifice. Here's $60 trillion in debt. I'm going to the lake. Good luck. I'm not willing to do that. And if we don't do this together, we'll be known. I'm 55 years old. We'll be known as the generation that prospered the most, but sacrificed the least. How many of you guys are not willing to do that as well? You're willing to help make some changes. So it's time that we do this. It's time that we begin to innovate. I put together a 7-year economic rescue plan that balances the budget. It does this, first of all, by actually starting to get rid of non-defense discretionary spending, cutting it 2% a year. It's not too austere. We can do it. It's just going to take leadership. It's going to take us connecting to a whole group of people in a different way. And it's actually going to happen through us revitalizing healthcare as well. Healthcare is something the Republican Party's just abandoned to other people. We've decided to let the Democrats have a leadership role in that. When is the last time you've said, where is the Republican-led healthcare plan that's an alternative to socialized healthcare? Has anybody seen one? How many of you are ready for a Republican-led healthcare plan? A Republican-led one. What does that look like? Well, let me share with you what it looks like, because what it is, basically right now, our healthcare plan is already socialized medicine. I remember when Obamacare was being voted on, everybody was so afraid of a single-payer system. You guys are with me, I'm sure. Well, we can't have that. Please don't have that. But we've already have socialized healthcare in America, and here's how. It's the only thing you and I purchase every day as Americans, that we walk into a doctor's office, a clinic, or a hospital, and we no longer ask this one question: how much does this cost for me to be here today? Nobody asks that question. They have convinced us it's too complicated, or we're not intelligent enough to understand, and they just say, hey, just give me your card, don't worry about it. And we give them our card, we find out 90 days later how much that cost, and we're like, oh, thank God I have insurance, and they pay it off, hopefully. Meanwhile, over the next few years, our premiums go up 20% a year, and we wonder why. And right now, this is what happens. A family of four, I have over 300 employees in our company. A family of four is $31,000 a year with a high deductible plan. How is it that wages aren't going up along with regular inflation? Well, let me tell you how. Healthcare inflation is 40% higher than regular inflation for the last 20 years, and we have done nothing about it. We just kind of look the other way as Republican leaders going, I don't understand it. Here's the problem. It's a system of monopolies in three areas: the health insurance exchanges, the providers themselves, and big pharma. And as president, this is what I would do. I would create competition. In Iowa, I've looked at it in several states. There are usually 2 or 3 major healthcare insurance exchanges. I've got 6,000 plus competitors in the M&A industry, investment banking. We need competition. It'll bring prices down. It'll help us, all right? We need to allow small employers to be able to develop associations. Right now, small employers, even like myself, I've got 400 employees max in all the businesses I have. I'm small compared to some of these big businesses with 10,000 employees. We pay 30% more on insurance than other people do, and the reason is because we can't compete based on the number. We need to create new associations that allow you and me and smaller businesses to gather together to self-insure and to compete fairly again. We actually have to have price visibility. We have to, there's 3 prices at every hospital clinic. There's the list price, there's the negotiated price, and you know what? There's this thing called a cash price. I have a friend of mine, his daughter-in-law, they were having a baby just this past year, and they went into the hospital, and they have a $12,000 high deductible plan. They went right in and said, how much does it cost to have the baby? Oddly enough, $12,000. How many of you were newly married and you had $12,000 cash? Nobody's got that, right? And so they're like, what do? We can't afford this. They said, well, can you pay cash? They said, I don't know, how much is it? Hospital got back and said, how about $5,000? That difference is called waste. 60%. What else in the world do we purchase at where one price is $12,000, but the cash price is 60% less? So we've got to change some things in America. What we're going to change is the ability to influence our culture economically. And when we do that, we'll change it every single way. That'll free our economy up. We'll be able to balance the budget because the budget now is 40% of our budget is Medicare, Medicaid, Obamacare, and other affiliated programs with healthcare. It's eating away our economy. And my plan will balance the budget through revitalizing healthcare. We'll have a lean economy. We'll actually revitalize and save Social Security, and we'll win the heart of America back. And here's how we'll do it. We'll begin to win urban America again when we decide to have a message for urban America. What is the message for urban America? What is the Republican message for the poor? Recognize this, that if you're poor today and you don't know where next week is coming from, and you have no idea, and you've got one party, the Democratic Party, promising you free food, free clothing, free tuition, free health care, free whatever, that can be pretty compelling if you don't know how you're going to make it. What's our message? Why would they vote for us? In fact, 88% of urban America is voting for the Democratic Party, and we want them to believe that our message is the best message, and it is the best message for them, but how are we connecting it to them? And this is what I'm suggesting. I believe this. We have to make a change in our country to really start to connect to people in a brand new way. And it's time for us to start a work movement and a volunteer movement in urban America and show them an alternative to socialism. And it's called volunteerism. It's called care. It's called vocational trade training. And it's actually calling college students, if you can envision hundreds of thousands of them across the nation, volunteering 5 hours a week, teaching a third grader on how to read. Right now in urban America, only 1 out of 6 children are reading at the 8th grade reading level. We are struggling. And when we start to dive into urban America, and we start teaching job training, how to have a living wage job again, we're going to show them that it's not big government helping them, it was a friend. And when we do this, listen to this, we'll change the culture of our country. We'll actually be able to lead and actually have a border security plan, because it's going to take bipartisan support to balance the budget, a bipartisan support plan in order to lead in healthcare. It's going to take that as well to have border security. I believe we can put the military on the border, but it's a short-term solution until we decide to fund it. And Congress has the power of the purse, and the only way to get them to get rid of that is through leadership. And I can't vilify a Democrat on Friday and say, hey, come work with me on a budget on Monday. It's going to take transcendent leadership. We're going to have to take, I would say this, the anger that we felt, the resentment we felt, and we're going to have to do this as a party and as a nation, turn it into inspiration. And if we don't take that and turn it into inspiration, it'll turn into apathy, further resentment, and we can't do that. It's time for us to lead again. It's time for a revival to happen in America, and this is what I'm telling America. It's just going to take us believing. When I first started this journey 4 months ago, I was speaking with Governor Reynolds of Iowa in the evening one night at an event like this. And they have gravel and they have dirt roads all throughout Iowa. We were getting to a noon event, and we got stuck in the mud. They'd been praying for rain. We went over this hill. It rained on the other side of the hill. We fishtailed. We tried to speed our way up the next hill. We couldn't get up, and we fell all the way back down. And I'm stuck in a ditch in the mud. I get out, I'm this much in mud, and I'm supposed to speak with the governor that night. If a tow truck was right there, we wouldn't be able to get through. I was like, dear God, what do we do? A friend of mine walked up the hill, and a lady stopped us in a white pickup truck, and she said, do you need help? She had a friend with a tractor, and they helped us out. Her name was Faith. Her name was Faith. And this is what I've been telling America ever since. It's going to take faith to step into something new. It's going to take us stepping in, believing in God, believing in each other, to win again, to come up with new ways that aren't big government ways, but leadership ways for the Republican Party, for budgeting, for health care, for education reform, for volunteerism in urban America, to truly win again. And when we win again, and we believe in God and each other, we'll lead again internationally. Right now, China's not paying attention to us. Putin's not paying any attention to us. The world isn't, because we're so weak. When we save the dollar and we're strong in dollar, we'll lead well internationally. And when we do that, we'll change the culture of our country. I'm Ryan Binkley. I'm running for president to help bring a revival to our country, a true revival, an economic and a heartfelt revival. Please follow us at Binkley2024.com. God bless.